entertainment, insights. Don't take life too seriously. Welcome to Brainsky Unleashed. Right. Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to Brainsky Unleashed. We have Victoria Pelletier with us. She is a 20-plus year corporate executive, board director, #1 best-selling author, public speaker. This person is unafraid to just go for it in life, and I love people like that. They're always inspiring, so welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me. I'm very happy to be here.
All right. So, in learning about you, and especially talking to you before the call a little bit, there has at least been some struggles that you've had in life early on. Can you kind of go into that a little bit? Because I think what I would love to be able to expose as we talk to you for the next 20 minutes or so is what takes someone who is just unstoppable. What drives that? So can we get into that?
Sure. I should say that I wasn't so forthcoming about this many years ago. It was like this shield or protection of armor I think I put up around myself. And I realized I was doing a significant disservice, particularly to those that I was coaching and mentoring, by not telling them my origin story, my why, so to speak. And it is what has driven me to be unstoppable. It's kind of my life philosophy or mantra. And so that early story is that I was born to a drug addicted teenage mother who was exceptionally abusive to me. I went in and out of the child welfare system for the first few years. And then she ended up meeting a couple who ultimately ended up adopting me after several episodes of abuse with me. And the last of which was actually, Julie, my biological mother, calling the people that would later adopt me and said, "Come and get her before I kill her." And my adoptive mother said to her, like, we'd like to take her away from you. And so I'm very fortunate. And it was only 4 years with Julie, but so traumatic and abusive that I still recall a significant portion of that. A cigarette, in my eyes when I'm like tired, you'll see it droop still, to being pushed up and down stairs, dislocated shoulders, you name it. But my parents who adopted me, although loving, not abusive at all, and my mother in particular was an amazing human who did a lot to help this very scarred, both literally and figuratively, little girl, learn, resilience and how to overcome more of the adversity. But my parents were not from a high socioeconomic position. My dad was a janitor, my mom a secretary. No vacations did we take. I couldn't go on many school field trips. So I started working at age 11 to pay for. I didn't have to worry about, clothes or food insecurity and those kinds of things, but just nothing extra. And so started working to pay for anything I wanted above and beyond what my parents could afford. And then became, the assistant manager of the shoe store at 14, et cetera. And my mom said to me at one point, I think I was probably around 11 years old, she said, "Tori, you need to do better than us." And she meant socioeconomically through vocation and education. And I'll tell you, Thomas, she never needed to utter those words to me, because even if I didn't necessarily have the vernacular back then as I describe it now, I was determined that I would be better than biology or the circumstance. And so that's caused me to be as driven as I am. Unstoppable for me is nothing, no obstacle, challenge, or adversity that comes my way will stop me from getting towards the goal or objective that I set for myself. And so those early years were super formative. And there was many other things along the way that I've experienced, from a teenage rape to an abusive, one of my boyfriend later on, to challenges through the work world, to even just 18 mergers and acquisitions in the career that I've been a part of, like, create significant challenge. And so all of those are foundationally what causes me to drive as hard as I do in a fierce determination to be better than, again, biology, circumstance.
Oh my gosh. I mean, that in itself is, it's a very difficult upbringing, obviously. I love the fact that you have this natural resiliency. So, I mean, even though it didn't necessarily come from upbringing, you just kind of have this natural resiliency. What do you think drives the natural resiliency, though? Like, what fire was lit under that butt that makes you go, "I'm going to take over running a store at 14"?
Um, you've said something. I do think there is innately in my DNA something. It's not just when we talk nature versus nurture. I think there's
Yeah, yeah,
nature in here, the natural instinct to fight or flight. I'm a fighter through and through.
yeah.
So,
That
so I do think that that's what's caused me to, be as driven and want to do more and better. And so for me, again, I'm not sure that I wouldn't have said, "Hey, my goal is to be a CEO someday." And in fact, I actually wanted to be a lawyer, so I didn't even follow down that path myself. I just knew that I was trying to progress further and further early on, and I do think it was completely mistaken. To some regards, it was about material possessions. I would prove to the world that I had achieved more
yeah.
and better through more wealth, through the tangible, visible assets that I had. I learned long ago that wasn't the case. But again, that not having it growing up was part of the reason that I pushed so hard. And the other thing was again this sense of trying to prove and be that fighter. Uh, I My progression, even from a career perspective, was also about challenging myself and doing something more and different and proving that I could do it. And again, I think there's a big part of that that's innate. And so even though when I like coach and mentor people, there's lots of those things I cannot teach because I do think you need to have that fire in your belly.
Yeah, I mean, I was hearing that from you right out of the gate as you're talking because, these are some of those, innate talents or skills that you have or traits that you have, those are teachable. Those, you can encourage, you could push. Some of that's just all you, girl, and that's powerful and impressive. Um, but the things that you can possibly teach, like, I think about it and I think, like, I have a very I don't wanna say I have a similar upbringing, because I didn't have the trauma that you experienced, but at the same time, just like yourself, at 11 years old, I was earning money because I wanted a Sony Walkman so I could listen to music while I, ride my bike and it had mega bass, which was like a big deal,
Oh my gosh,
and,
I'm so
and my
age
father,
because I remember having the yellow one, right?
oh, yeah, I didn't go yellow because, that was like the waterproof one. And, I just went with the regular. But I wanted that mega base. And, my father, was like, well, listen, you can absolutely have that. I'm like, great. But you got to earn it. And so like at 11 years old, like I was mowing lawns and I think maybe if parents would, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I mean, this is like a belief I have. I think if parents would kind of push their kids out of the nest a little bit earlier and just say, hey, you know what, maybe you need to earn this, work for this. Maybe they would actually understand the value of a dollar a little bit more and be a little bit more aggressive as they get older so that way they could be more successful. Because I mean, it sounds like some of that drive that you have, and I mean, I have a very natural drive myself, but some of that is taught by being forced to acquire what you want, understanding the value of your work. What are your thoughts on that as far as even the way children are brought up today?
I agree with you. I have two children of my own, 23 and 19. And I've tried to teach them the value of hard work, of a dollar. And it's interesting. I mean, yet I still given them things I never had, so going on vacations and having a nice home and all of these kinds of things. So they still live a very privileged life. When they
Yeah,
wanted these
yeah.
extra things, I remember saying, like, "You need to work for them." For my younger one, I had bought, I don't know, one of the newer iPhones and then said, "Oh, I need whatever the next one was." I'm like, "Well, if you want it, then you can." It was babysitting, it was different things. I'm like, "Then you can work and you can save for it." So I've been trying to teach them that. I find generationally, like they do actually say this will be the first generation that doesn't do as well as their parents. And I'm not sure if because for
It's
they
sad.
gave it to them. And I remember my older son saying to me at one point, he's like, I don't think he said I was mean, but he's like, none of my other friends' parents make them do this. Cause I said, I'll pay for post secondary education if they maintain a B average or above. So just put in a little, they're both smart
Mm.
kids. I'm like, just put in a little bit of effort. And my son did it for the first semester of college. The second one, he didn't. So I'm like, well, then, buddy, you need to pay me back. And you work construction in the summer to pay me back for it. Like, it doesn't come in a silver platter for you. You have to work hard. This is real life. And so I do
So
think we need to be teaching our kids more of this.
yeah, so I mean, raising your kids now. Your kids are older than mine. I waited way too late in life to have children, because it sounds like we're probably about the same age. But when I have my 8-year olds in the back of our minivan. that, has the technology package, and we talk about replacing the minivan, and we have to have the conversation, not because we've intended to spoil our children, but just out of the nature of a lifestyle that I never had when I was a kid to a lifestyle that I have now. The shock and awe that comes from, what do you mean other cars don't have TV screens in them? Like, what do you mean? Because my car, my SUV, actually has heated seats in the back, and it's like, well, it may not have heated seats in the back either. What? I thought every car should have that. I'm like, man, you guys don't understand. Daddy couldn't even really roll down the window all the way in the car that we had. That my entertainment was looking out that window. Um, Based on the fact that you were a CEO and a powerhouse CEO and a powerhouse speaker, what messaging should we all be putting out there to try and resolve this going forward to our employees, to parents, because this is a generational problem as I see it. What are your thoughts on that?
I look back on my career, and one of the things I will talk about now is what do I attribute a lot of that success to? And as I've shared with you, my why comes a lot from that sort of that origin story. That's the drive. That's in terms of me wanting to do more and better. But the reality is beyond that, there are sort of bucketed into four areas. One is resilience. And so the ability to, like, I look at, I think, my younger one wants the easy button all the time. And I'm like, beauty, that's not that's not life, right? So teaching, not only our children, but in the workplace, how to be resilient and a healthy level of resilience. Because I don't think mine was healthy. I built great walls around me, but it certainly hurt in some of the relationships as they needed to come down, as I, needed to fear less about rejection and having some of those insecurities. So find a way to be really resilient, which for me means keeping your eye on the towards the goal or objective, being incredibly self-aware and self-reflective, and then starting to model the thinking, the actions, the behaviors to get you towards that goal or objective, and also giving yourself permission to fail. And so that's one thing I really think we need to be teaching both children and within the workplace. And then beyond that,
Amen.
sorry, go ahead.
I said, amen. I mean, permission to fail. Like, that is all part of success. I'm one of the world's greatest failures because I just get back up again, right?
Exactly.
But can I back you up for a second, because I want to give you like a hypothetical. So you talk to business owners, you coach, you stand on stage. Um, if you were to walk into, Joe Blow's pizza shop in downtown America, and Joe Blow is having a conversation with you, and you just feel connected, you want to help Joe Blow, what would you tell him to do as far as trying to get his employees to learn to be more resilient? Because you got to keep in mind, Joe Blow hires 16-year-old kids.
Yeah, I think there's the ability to create a safe space and working environment is a big part of that. I referred to, and I made some pretty big missteps in early in my executive and leadership journey, in part due to how I thought I needed to show up. So I had a nickname as the Iron Maiden, and that's not actually who I am. Like, I'm incredibly emotional and soft and mushy on the inside, but that's how I showed up. And it wasn't until I started, one, being more vulnerable myself, talking about my own story and being really authentic, that creates that safe space. So I tell Joe, around creating that kind of environment, even with the 16-year-old students that are, in their working part-time jobs while they're in school, creating an environment in which they feel like they can trust him and have dialogue, so that when stuff happens, that builds up the resilience because they start to have conversation. And Joe would say, it's okay to make a
Yeah.
mistake. And this is how we learn from that. And then we progress and move forward. Those are really simple ways. You don't have to be an executive in some huge Fortune 500 company to be doing that. You can be doing that in every work setting, environment, and quite honestly, in our personal lives and community as well.
You interact in all different environments. You've interacted within, Fortune 500 types of situations. Why in God's name can't they figure this out? Brainsky Unleashed is powered by ProfitMax. Did you know that 93% of businesses overpay on their taxes? Do you pay too much in taxes? A recent study showed that businesses are overpaying between 34 and 71%. ProfitMax has proven, legal tax strategy solutions to reduce your tax burden. I'm not only a client, but I even joined the team to help other business owners just like me pay only their fair share and nothing more. Go to profitmax.co. That's profitmax.co. Profitmax.co to find out more. You can even connect with me there, as you should. And I'll help make sure that your tax bill is legally as low as allowed. ProfitMax. Keep your cash.
Oh, well, I think there's a multitude of reasons. So I think there's a lot of, that. So if you look at generationally, and I just saw a report, I don't know who published it, literally yesterday, the day before, I was looking at it around at the C-suite, they're baby boomers, sort of plus even still
Yep.
there. And so generationally, this is how people led. And so they haven't learned to lead differently. So I think that's one, a really big part of it. And then the newer generation of leaders are learning from those who've been successful and are their own leaders. So I think that's a big part of it. And the other is, you know, the incentives that are put in business drive certain behavior. And we need to start changing some of those models in incentive.
Give me some examples.
Well, so, I'm typically measured. I run for these Fortune 500 companies. I'm usually running a whole market unit or a business unit for them. And my measurement of success, as are many in the organization, is about sales, revenue, and gross profit. And
Based on KPIs.
rather than looking at a more holistic, as we just talked about, how do you engage with employees? Sure, there's a
Yeah.
metric where they look at employee engagement surveys, satisfaction surveys, but look at diversity metrics maybe and how we're moving the needle forward. But the majority of compensation comes based upon sales and revenue and profitability. And in these large companies that are quarter to quarter focused, it requires, instead of focusing on, I'm going to borrow from Simon Sinek, the infinite game, right? You don't win at life, just like you don't win in business. Yes, you win contracts. There's something short term you win, but too many of these businesses are very myopically focused and making decisions, short-term trade-offs versus kind of the longer term, what I just refer to as the right thing to do in terms of client relationships, employee relationships, and value proposition for those short-term results. And they're incented that way. So it won't change behavior if we don't start looking at a much broader model for incentives that's more balanced.
So I see, I agree with you on principle, but in my mind, I'm thinking, how what do you do to incentivize differently? How does that look? What does that, what does that look like?
So many companies talk about having a corporate mission, vision, or purpose, and they
Half of it's crap.
yes, they put it up on the wall or on the intranet when you log
Yeah.
in. Uh,
And nobody cares.
no, they don't live up to it. Are you very values and integrity
Yeah.
driven? And I don't believe there needs to be a trade-off in business for business results by having a great culture and leadership mindset
Mhm.
and doing the right thing in business. And that's what I think we need to educate, and where I spend a lot of time with like C-suite executives and boards, talking to them about this. The notion of they're like, oh, these ESG initiatives, it's just like a tick in the box and we have to do. I'm like, no, it's not. Right? Having a diverse, equitable, inclusive culture is proven to deliver results for the business, greater problem solving and innovation, less risk, that's seen in the business, et cetera. And so constantly educating around that. And so for me, it doesn't need to actually come from the top, as much as I believe culture is something, not only top down in that lead by example, but also creating that kind of culture of safety where people, entry level people into the company can say, that's not right. That doesn't look right. So you want to create that kind of environment, but it does need to come from the top. And so stop saying that this is the culture you have and the vision, mission, purpose for the organization if you're truly not going to abide by the things uh, uh, that that you need to deliver against to really be that great purpose-led organization.
So the culture angle is, to me, very important. Um, I don't think anyone on earth wakes up in the morning and goes, man, I really look forward to going to my stuffy job where nobody gives a crap about me and treats me like a number. Like, nobody actually wakes up that way. And yet in corporate America, that's very common. Or nobody wakes up in the morning and goes, I am just so motivated to get to work so that way I can do the best that I can and have my boss look at me and tell me it's never good enough. Or, I can't wait to go into my job that has policies in place that make no sense to any human being, but they won't change the policies because they are brain dead. Like, nobody actually looks at that and goes, this is awesome. Yet this is what's so common in so many businesses. But I'm trying to drill down a little bit based on what you said. So you were talking about changing the actual incentive structure. So I don't necessarily know if the incentive structure and the culture are equally entwined, because the incentive structure is still generally based off of pay or benefits or time off or whatever, and that's usually that motivator. The only exception that I could see, and this is where I'd love it if you can correct me if I'm wrong or steer me in the right direction, is the benefit of working for a company that has a healthy culture.
It when you look at what's referred to as the employee value proposition,
Okay,
compensation, total compensation, which includes your salary and benefits and bonus and all of those
sure.
things and vacation. That's just one part of it. What we saw over the last couple of years, and I hate kind of the news headlines that have been grabbed, but when we hear great resignation, quiet quitting, again, great headlines. But the reality is there was a movement that occurred, and the pendulum swung because there was no separation anymore. We work out of our homes, and worked more hours typically in doing so. And this is where employees stood up and said, I don't want this, much like you described. Like, I don't want to go into a place where I am not appreciated or valued, or I don't see the impact that my work has on kind of the bigger mission or purpose for the organization. And so that's why there was mass exodus, for many employees. Now what we're seeing is with particularly tech layoffs. I mean, I saw last month there was still 100. Just this morning I read that 150 jobs here in the U.S. that were created last month, a slowdown versus prior months, but still showing that there is still growth. Yet there's still apprehension for employers who are slowing down some hiring, and they believe they can pay less and those kinds of things. But the reality is employees want different now. They expect that their employee value proposition is going to look towards purpose and impact down to an individual level. What am I doing that contributes to that? Even if you're an entry level employee, and this is where I believe as a leader, you have to help articulate that. You need to build the bridge for them. This is how the work you do here impacts the team, the department, the business, overall our clients, and that hopefully gain some kind of connection to their own individual purpose and values. That's what employees want. And I describe it as I don't do things personally or professionally that don't bring me joy or value. So I either say no. Now I've earned the right as an executive. It's a lot easier for me to say no than to others. I get it, or I outsource or I delegate. And so I think we have choice. I sign a lot of my social media posts, not just unstoppable, but no excuses. You know, no choice is a choice. And so if you are not happy, and I live by the 80-20 rule of that joy and value, if 80% of the time I get up and I'm excited about going into work and enjoy the people that I'm working with, amazing. There's always going to be 20% of like BS we need to do, administration stuff, or one or two humans we don't enjoy working with. That's fine. When that mix changes, that's when it's time to take action. Taking control of what you can, and then making change if you cannot.
Is it fair to say, and I mean, in my opinion, just sharing my opinion, is it fair to say, though, that with the pendulum that swung, uh, did it swing too far? I see and I have experienced situations where, yes, people are getting better pay, which is nice. But if you are paying someone at a gas station that sells cigarettes $20 an hour, that's probably not a great thing, because now you have an expectation. Well, I am worth 20. My labor, my ability to sell the cigarettes at $20 an hour means that I am worth $20 an hour because I sell cigarettes for $20 an hour. Is that a pendulum swing too far?
I do think in 20 it didn't really start to swing far until 2021. I think, once it was clear like
21,
the,
yeah.
the pandemic was really going to like last a lot longer than we all expected. We saw it towards the end of 2020, but into 2021. And a lot of it had to do with the fact that there were massive digital transformations. I mean, every company, whether you were a
Huge.
technology company or not, you were a technology company, because the expectation is we're going to have a consumer grade Amazon like experience from our home, regardless of what product or service we were buying or consuming. And so therefore everyone was needing to hire those resources. So we saw 1 in 200% increases. And so yes, the pendulum swung way too far, which is why we saw this massive like layoff, particularly in the tech sector, as some of that started to normalize. And so now the pendulum's swinging back again, and employers are recognizing I don't have to be giving them a 25 to 100% increase over wherever they are today. Uh, Now, what I'm
Yeah.
seeing is they're trying to swing it back a little bit to overcompensate for those they're still paying for, overpaying for potentially, and that's not the right solution either. So we need to kind of find what is the appropriate middle.
We got to find the middle ground.
Yeah.
Right. So in finding the middle ground, and I was never I thank goodness for me in one respect is I'm a small business guy and an entrepreneur to the core. I did not have to deal with the Fortune 500 reactions, but I did see it and now had to pivot to deal with it post pendulum long distance swing. In other words, how do you take people who were made to believe, all right, so and we'll just call them kids, but how do you take people who are made to believe that their value is so much higher based on the tasks that they know or the training that they had or whatever it was that they were doing, which was way overpriced, and then bring them back down to earth and say, well, actually, it's you're not really worth $20 an hour to sell cigarettes, and do it in a way that doesn't destroy the employee or the business at the same time.
It's I mean, I think it really importantly in all of this is to come with as much data, fact, and figure as possible. And so I encourage, employees who might have been accustomed to the $20 per hour that, using your example around really looking at, okay, let me take a broad view of, what the salary or data points are out there. And harder to find for the example you use, but like Glassdoor in more corporate settings, you can get a pretty good idea both of what the average trend lines have been, but then you can start to see as new salary data rolls in, get a perspective of that. So I think it's really important. I've always advocated for people to ask for their value and their worth, but they need to know that first, and that includes not only what is the market paying, what skills and experience do I bring, and how connected is that to the business strategy, those kinds of things. But then there is a level setting. There's going to be some industry. I remember the first time I got relocated to the US. I'm originally from Canada, and I remember talking to my boss. I'm like, well, this is what it looks like in New York. I think it was a VP job. It was 20 years ago or something. And I'm like, this is what it pays in New York. And he's like, well, let me just remind you, like our industry doesn't pay anywhere near that. And I'd done quite a bit of homework. And so getting back to, the immediate question is, both employers and employees need to be really aware, and arm themselves with data to be able to have a much less biased conversation, as we advocate what we want to pay employees, or as employees what we would like to be paid. But that said, I have this saying, and my younger one in particular has this down pat: you don't ask, you don't get.
Well, that I agree with. I mean, if you can't have an open conversation, then you're never going to get anywhere because, if you hide it, it doesn't exist. If you don't say it, it never happened, right? I mean, that's a legal thing. If you don't put it in writing, it never,
Yeah.
it doesn't exist. So I agree with you there. I think that, maybe because, you and I have a common background of, okay, if you're going to screw me, I don't care. I'm going to keep going. Or, oh, I didn't get what I want. Well, forget it. I'm going to go get what I want. I'm going to bust my butt for it. Not necessarily because others feel I deserve it, but because I feel I deserve it. And therefore, I will do whatever it takes to get to it. And I think because of that pendulum movement, and I mean, especially on the small business side, is how they were affected. You had a lot of people being paid to stay at home, quite frankly, and that became very hard. And so to overcome that, there was very high wages that were going out to just bring people in to get them out of their houses to come to work, which was insane. Um, I don't know if there's a way to try and get people to recognize, you know what, sometimes you might just have to earn it. And I think that still may exist. I think during that period of 2020 and especially 21 and 22, there was not a lot of people who were necessarily earning it as much as they were being given something just by the nature of, I got to have a body in here. How do we make sure that people earn it when people don't necessarily want to be told that. It's almost like dealing with kids, like you were talking to your own kids, or like you had to go out at 11, or I had to go out and earn it.
Yeah, I think there's I mean, there's a lot I think that, we need to be doing. And so I think there's, as I said, there's this element of education that needs to come. And I also think there's some trial and error here. Like these, I'll use your words, like young people need to go out, apply, go have like apply for jobs, expecting that you're going to make
Oh,
$100,000 a year. Like, let's just hear what's coming back. And then, I mean, that in itself, like the reality hits them in the face. So it's like, oh, okay, well, maybe I'm going to need to compromise on this. So I think they need to go out and experience it as much as we can, again, provide the education and reality. I do think we need to let them try and potentially fail and learn from
yeah.
themselves so that they, can come back. And then it becomes a very different conversation around, again, did they around compromise? And I say that because I think many of them have just gotten accustomed and spend. I think of my older one who like is just so like, I'm going to spend the money I earn versus let me learn about saving any money. And so, and they, their lifestyle grows to the income that they're earning. So then again, we're going to need to adjust some things here. And so I think that's really important, whether that's as parents, and many kids are moving back home with mom and dad. So whether that's as parents or in that role that we play in coaching and guiding others from a work perspective.
I think that you've provided some of the best news possible in this interview. And that is the fact that at the end of the day, no matter what the circumstances are, be it some of the changes to the way that companies are running and culture, and whether the pay is increasing or coming back down to normal levels, you basically came down to one very simple principle as far as how to be successful. And this is the thing that I love because it is consistent among a span of all time. You have to fail to succeed.
Yes, you
And so,
do.
above all else, I love the fact that even though you can add tons of value in different ways, I think everyone just needs to understand that failure is critical and it's okay. That's a pretty good takeaway. Am
No, I absolutely agree with you 100%.
I right? So, from the woman who is the turnaround queen, unafraid, unabashed, and unstoppable, the advice that you are offering, if you took nothing away from this conversation, Victoria, what is it?
Well, we just said it, to be unstoppable and resilient and grow in your personal and professional lives, you need to not fear failure and pick yourself
Yes.
back up and learn from that, and do better.
Guiding principle. So, no matter what it is, whether it's complex and trying to get businesses to add culture, deal with incentives above all else, we all need to just get back down to that core value that the rest of us, I mean that all of us need to understand. I mean, this is basic human value, and it doesn't matter whether you're a CEO or you're a dishwasher. You got to be comfortable with failure. Say, I love stuff like this. Thank you, Victoria. Because what we just did is we literally went global and brought it back down to basics, which is so easily able to be chunked down and understood. What a fun conversation. Thank you so much. Now, if anyone would like to learn more about you, how could they find you, learn about you, connect with you, do business with you, send you fan mail?
I'd love fan mail. So I have a website which can be the one stop shop for people to then branch out and connect with me on other platforms, which is Victoria-Pelletier.com. And as I said, they can link out whether it's to LinkedIn, Facebook, Insta. There's some I'm not on. My younger one will tell me I'm old for not being there. But again, they can connect with me there and stay up to breast of all the content and the what's going on of Victoria.
All right. Well, thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts for the audience, the rest of the world that is listening to this and going, I just got something important?
Well, what I would think want to share is this notion of being in charge and control of what I just referred to as you're the CEO of brand you. So don't let others, put your career in their hands. You take charge of it, control what you can control. As I said, no choice is a choice. And so make some of those choices and move forward to whatever your own version of success is, because that will be very different for other people. And as we just said, I'll close with not fearing failure.
All right, there we go. And so, when it comes to branding, just try not to be too stupid. Good luck with that one. All right. Well, thank you again, Victoria. It's been a pleasure talking to you. And again, anyone that wants to reach out to her, go to that website, follow her on Instagram, follow her on Facebook. She is absolutely spectacular. And we're going to see you next time.